Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. It's Sunday night. It's the last Sunday in January 2019. I'm glad you're here. A whole bunch of folks have piled up into the chat room. We're ready to go. It's the witching hour. It's January 26, 2020. Time is flying by. It's already a month into the new year. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about this week. I had to cut it off. It was just so much is piling out, and it's not all about Washington, D.C. There's a lot of other things that are going on. I hope that you are rested and you're in a comfortable place, and we'll spend this time together. You know that the Bible Forum is a ministry of alternatives, biblical counseling, and education, maintained solely by the interest and contributions of folks like you who watch the program and seem to enjoy it. Sent out the W-2s this week for last year. Did the same thing I did last year. Messed up the number on the same people same family that's been sending money. I don't know what it is. I had it right on the paper, had it wrong on the W-2 when it went out. I guess these are things that happen to keep me humble. And I am. It's like that. And I don't know what to tell you except thank you. I appreciate all of you who take an active part in this ministry. I think you've been paying attention to some extent. Some of you women maybe not so much. That's a sexist comment, I realize. But, generally speaking, women aren't interested in politics and what's happening. But the thing is just going absolutely crazy up there in Washington. So far, the Republicans have had a day to rebut all of the things that the Democrats presented in the last several days of last week. Here are some of the things the Republicans have laid out. A fellow by the name of Mike Porpora, he's the White House counsel, and he is listing the salient facts relative to the now infamous phone call at Ukraine, or at least the transcript from it. He says the transcript shows that the president did not condition either security assistance or a meeting on anything. He said, quote, the paused security assistance funds aren't even mentioned on the call. Secondly, he says the Ukrainian officials deny being pressured. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials have repeatedly said that there was no quid pro quo and no pressure on them to review anything. Democrats said sure they would say that. Thirdly, Ukraine did not know about the paused aid. President Zelensky and high-ranking Ukrainian officials did not know the security assistance was paused until the end of August. That's over a month after the July 25th phone call. Fourthly, no witnesses say Trump tied the aid to the Biden investigation. He said not a single witness testified that the president himself said there was any connection between any investigations in security assistance, a presidential meeting, or anything else. Number 5, he says security assistance aid continued after the phone call. The security assistance flowed on September 11, and a presidential meeting took place on September 25 without the Ukrainian government announcing any investigations. Sixthly, President Trump has been a strong ally of Ukraine. The Democrats' blind eye to impeach the president does not and cannot change the fact, as attested to by the Democrats' own witnesses, that President Trump has been a better friend and supporter of Ukraine than was Obama. Interesting. They're going to get together again tomorrow, that's Monday, and we'll see more of this as it pours out. They're saying they just got the highlights. They've got some real facts coming out. I don't know what they're going to say. Over at the High Court, the Supreme Court on Friday agreed once again to take up the Obama-era abortion/contraceptive mandate in a case that will determine if a Trump administration rule granting religious exemptions to the mandate was proper. Lower courts have ruled against the Trump administration, with the administration appealing to the high court. At issue are rules finalized by the Trump Department of Health and Human Services in 2018 that exempted employers, quote, who have a religious or moral objection, end of quote, to contraceptives and certain abortion-inducing drugs from being forced to cover them within Obamacare. The new rules did not apply to publicly traded companies. The Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, required the coverage of, quote, preventative care, end of quote, which Obama's Health and Human Services Department interpreted as covering any Food and Drug Administration-approved contraceptive and sterilization procedure, including those such as Plan B, which can work after fertilization, and something called ELA, E-L-L-A, which can work after implantation. Pro-life groups consider the latter two drugs to be abortifacients. Pennsylvania and California filed suit in separate circuits against the Trump rules in federal court and won. The Supreme Court will then hear appeals from the Pennsylvania case, Trump versus Pennsylvania, and from a separate case, Little Sisters of the Poor versus Pennsylvania. The two cases are going to be consolidated. The Little Sisters of the Poor, it's an institute of Catholic nuns who serve the elderly poor, previously won in 2016. The Supreme Court decision ruled in their favor. The justices unanimously voided lower court rulings and returned the cases back down to those circuits. The Supreme Court justices, though, did not rule on the merits of the case. Apparently they have to do that now. The Little Sisters of the Poor believed they'd won an exemption when the Trump administration issued its new rules, but then Pennsylvania filed suit. Mother Lorraine Marie McGuire of the Little Sisters of the Poor said, quote, it's disappointing to think that as we enter a new decade, we must still defend our ministry in court. We're grateful to the Supreme Court that it has decided to weigh in and hopeful that the justices will reinforce their previous decision and allow us to focus on our lifelong work of serving the elderly poor once and for all. The Becket Fund for Religious Liberty is representing the Little Sisters. Mark Renzi, president of Becket, said, quote, Pennsylvania needs to give it a rest, end of quote. Why is Pennsylvania still trying to fight tired and unnecessary culture wars that were settled years ago, he said. There are plenty of ways to provide people with contraceptives without forcing Catholic nuns to participate. It's too bad, he said, that the Supreme Court is being forced by Pennsylvania to deal with this issue one more time, but at least the court can now bring this litigation to a permanent end. Over in the Senate, something called Mediate.com is reporting that a panel on the Rachel Maddow show, MSNBC, was outraged. The Democrat senators were falling asleep or walking out of the impeachment trial on the very first day of testimony. Oh, and Trump's net approval numbers went up in 31 states between September and December. That according to something called Morning Consult data. His campaign raised $150 million in the last 3 months of 2019, attracted 600,000 new donors and 100,000 new volunteers. Oh, and the stock market hit a new high. One representative, Senator Rick Scott from Florida, said, quote, President Donald Trump's lawyers were so successful at dismantling the House Democrats' impeachment case on Saturday morning that one prominent Republican senator compared it to a mob hit. When asked by Fox News host Neil Cavuto what he thought of the arguments laid out by the president's defense team, he said it looked like Representative Adam Schiff got kneecapped. He said, I think the White House counsel showed there was no due process in the House. What Schiff said was just a fabrication. CNN analyst and former Obama advisor David Axelrod said on a focus group this week, or sat in on a focus group this week, and he said the results were clear. Even liberal Democrat voters are sick and tired of impeachment. Axelrod said, quote, I was in a focus group this morning for the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago with Chicago Democrat voters, and it was chilling to hear them talk about this because impeachment didn't even come up. The prominent Democrat strategist said the Democrats are ready to, quote, move on from impeachment. No one volunteered it for 80 minutes into the focus group, and we're in the middle of the trial. When it did come up, they said it's terrible what he did. The case has been proven, but we know how it's going to turn out, so we're not really that interested. We're ready to move on. Oh, and the TV ratings are in the tank. Axelrod's focus group observations appeared to be consistent with TV ratings for the first 2 days of the trial. According to New York Magazine, more than 11 million viewers combined tuned into the 6 news networks covering the first day of the Trump impeachment trial. Fox News drew the largest audience with 2.6 million viewers turning into their channel. By Wednesday, viewership had dropped by 20% to a total of 8.8 million people watching the proceedings. That according to the Nielsen ratings. MSNBC had the largest audience in the second day of impeachment with 1.8 million viewers tuning into their programming. So why are they impeaching the president? Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton explains what he calls the real reason behind the Democrats' never-ending impeachment drama. He said it was never about Russia. It was never about Ukraine. White House lawyer Pat Cipollone revealed to the nation and members of the Senate a major piece of evidence that Democrats have consistently omitted from their presentations. Quote, they didn't tell you that burden sharing was discussed in the phone call, referring to Trump's call with President of the Ukraine, that a corrupt Ukrainian government was using U.S. largesse as a tool to support their corrupt regime, that the Obama administration knew all about it and was using our aid as a tool to get what the administration wanted. They didn't tell the Senate or the American people that the current Ukrainian administration is committed to changing all of that, and that the burden sharing was discussed in that phone conversation, agreed to by the new president of Ukraine, and that President Donald Trump was targeted to protect then presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, former Vice President Joe Biden, and their cohorts in the state and Justice Departments from prosecution for corruption that took place during the Obama administration. Fitton says that's why we're involved in an impeachment. It's a diversion, because the president dared to ask questions about Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton's corruption. And he, Trump, gets impeached for asking the questions. Trump's actually the whistleblower. Behind the scenes in all of this, while the trial is continuing in the Senate, RealClearPolitics.com published the story on Friday that, quote, the federal judicial branch's ethics body, end of quote, is circulating a draft rule that would ban judges and clerks from belonging to the Federalist Society. Why? Well, the Federalist Society, according to Real Clear Politics, is fostering an originalist interpretation of the Constitution. They're doing this at law schools and through forums and debates across the country. And according to them, judges shouldn't be doing it. Keep in mind, the Federalist Society describes itself as a group of conservatives and libertarians interested in the current state of the legal order, and is, quote, founded on the principles that the state exists to preserve freedom, that the separation of governmental powers is central to our Constitution, and that it is emphatically the province and duty of the judiciary to say what the law is, not what it should be. Apparently liberals can't tolerate all that original Constitution stuff. Oh, and Donald Trump is a racist. Or maybe he's not. Alveda King, niece of civil rights activist Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., told Fox News this past Tuesday that claims by Democrats, pundits, and activists that President Donald Trump is a racist are inaccurate. On a Tuesday morning segment of Fox and Friends, King appeared for an interview with the morning show's co-host, Steve Doocy, to discuss a meeting she and other African-American pastors had with Trump at the White House and to comment on the president's recent attacks on Democrat Representative Elijah Cummings in his city, Baltimore. After Doocy played a clip of politicians and analysts criticizing the president, arguing that he's a racist, King disagreed strongly. She said, quote, "All of that news is absolutely fake." Mrs. King formerly served, or Miss King, formerly served as a representative in Georgia's State House. She told Doocy that the president told her and others in their meeting this week that, quote, "he cares about all Americans," end of quote. Oh, and President Trump is now the first president to march in the March for Life against abortion. As an aside to all of this, Hillary was quoted in a book apparently she's about to turn out, saying in the book that nobody likes Bernie. She made her feelings very clear about Bernie Sanders in this new documentary that's going to be aired not too far in the future, saying that nobody wants to work with him. Oh, and Trump is the first president to attend March for Life last Friday. Reagan, George Bush have spoken on the phone, but none of them have actually been there live, let alone walk. Not one Democrat president has ever darkened their door. It's like they don't exist. And under the heading of, "and they vote," saw a contestant on a game show recently. The question was asked, "What is Popeye's favorite food?" Her answer, "Chicken." False. The woman has never heard of the cartoon character. But you know the right answer, don't you? That's our generational gap. Popeye's not important. But the fact that there's no context in people under 40 is just amazing. Answers a lot of questions.